Okay, so this is our first of instructional videos that we're going to do, so just be gentle with us, please.
And we'll try to cram as much information as we can into a short space of time, but try to, I don't know, pare back the science a bit so that you can actually have takeaways from it, and you'll know what to actually do.
Yeah. So what we want to talk about is a thing called sulforaphane, which we've been, sort of banging on a little bit about, hinting about, at least over the last week or so. But if anyone's spoken to me, I've been banging on about it for a few months now. And its potential in the body to do some amazing things, lots of healing things and development and all those sorts of things. So, we've been put onto it to help our epileptic son. And yeah, from that we've done a lot of research and seen how it can not only help us, but him and lots of other people as well.
Yep, it's one of a class of compounds called isothiocyanates, but it's the one that has been shown the most promise in clinical trials across a wide variety of conditions. So as Claire mentioned, it's been used for treatment of epilepsy, but it's also been used for various other neurological disorders.
ASD, ADHD, anxiety, depression, Parkinson's, the list goes on with lots of different neurological disorders.
Yep, various cancers too, treatment for cancers. We'll go into that a little bit more in depth.
As well as cardiovascular health and heart disease. So, yeah. Anyway, so I guess we should start off with what actually is sulforaphane and where do we get it from, and how does it really help us. So the nutrient that we're looking for in the food is called glucoraphanin, which is the precursor to making sulforaphane. And what happens is we need to add that with an enzyme to break it down into sulforaphane. So glucoraphanin we get from cruciferous vegetables, but in particular the strongest one that we know of is the broccoli sprouts, so sprouts of broccoli plants. And about all cruciferous vegetables have it in it.
Yep, broccoli itself does as well, but the sprouts have a far greater bioavailability of the precursor, glucoraphanin.
Yep, and so as I said, you also need the enzyme myrosinase to create the sulforaphane in your body, and that's really important too. So a lot of our cruciferous vegetables, the way that we prepare them traditionally, actually breaks down the myrosinase, or it doesn't activate it as well. So we don't get the same benefit of the way that we eat a lot of our cruciferous vegetables. So when we're talking cruciferous vegetables, we're also talking things like cabbage, Brussels sprouts, pak choi, bok choy, kohlrabi. Sorry.
So, yeah.
We had a bit of a technical fail. I blame the cat.
Yeah, it's her fault. So how do you prepare your cruciferous vegetables so that you can maximise the yield of sulforaphane or the other isothiocyanates that you might be trying to get hold of? As was mentioned, traditional methods of preparation can tend to either destroy the enzyme or make less bioavailable the precursor. So we need to prepare our vegetables to try to maximise that yield, and that largely comes down to both the chopping, storing and heating of the vegetables.
Yeah, so with broccoli, for example, which is something that you can pick up from your local supermarket, so something really easy. What we tend to do is we heat some water up to 60 degrees. We put our broccoli in there and we leave it there for 10 minutes and keep it at 60 degrees. So for us, we use the Thermomix because it's really easy. The 60 degrees is a setting on it. But you can use your kettle and a cooking thermometer, and just as soon as your kettle hits 60 degrees, turn the kettle off, put your vegetables into a container, pour the water on and put a lid on it and leave it there for 10 minutes. So what that does is it breaks down another enzyme that stops you from making the sulforaphane without breaking the myrosinase down. But it also just maximises that glucoraphanin, that precursor that we're talking about. You're maximising that without breaking that down either. So you're getting the full amount that you can out of the vegetables. So, and if you're using broccoli sprouts, so if you're starting to sprout your own vegetables at home and you're using broccoli sprouts, you actually whack the temperature up to 70 degrees, and again for 10 minutes just let it sit there. So the other really important thing is either chopping or chewing. So blending, chopping, chewing, all those sorts of things are the things that get the glucoraphanin out of the cells and the sulforaphane out of the cells, so that you can use it. So you actually need to, chewing is just so underrated as a mechanism for eating and getting our nutrients, but actually chewing your food and taking the time to break those cells with your teeth is really important.
That's actually enough too to activate the enzyme and make it start doing its job. So you can actually, you can get enough benefit and enough sulforaphane itself just purely by chewing the raw vegetable itself. But these temperature spots are basically like a sweet spot for maximising the yield.
Yep. So, and the other thing is that, so you've got your cruciferous vegetables which have quite a large amount of the glucoraphanin in them, but then what you need to do is maximise your myrosinase, so that enzyme, that part of it. So there's a couple of ways you can do that to make it even better, and one is adding things like mustard seeds. So mustard seeds have myrosinase in them, so that also increases the yield of sulforaphane. And the other thing is your gut flora. So so some of the lactobacillus types of probiotics and things like that really can also help with maximising the amount of sulforaphane that you're able to get from your food. So a lot of people with issues often do have poor gut flora, so getting some sort of decent probiotic, or fermenting your food, so making things like kimchi and sauerkraut and all those sorts of things are going to only be of benefit to helping you make this sulforaphane, which is so important. So what does it actually do?
Yeah, we like to go, I guess, a little bit quickly through what happens in your body, and then some of the hard and fast benefits that it starts to produce in your body. So there's two major pathways, I guess, that we're seeing a lot of the clinical evidence for therapeutic benefit. One is something called the NRF2 pathway, and the other is it triggers something called a heat shock response. So NRF2.
So NRF2, we've got all these pathways in our body. So when you eat something, for example, it'll stimulate a set of hormones and chemicals and things in your body that sets off different things. So this is where you might hear terms like epigenetics and stuff like that. So what these do is they trigger genes to switch on and off. And, some genes we want switched on, others we want switched off, and, at appropriate times we want them to be working the way that they need to be working. So the NRF2 pathway is in control of over 200 different genes in our bodies. And these genes are responsible for things like antioxidant production, anti-inflammatory, they're detoxifying pathways, so making sure that your body's actually getting rid of the toxins, and for sulforaphane itself, benzene is a really big one that it helps to detoxify. It also helps with protecting the DNA, so making sure that the telomeres on the DNA and there's no DNA damage when you're occurring when cells are replicating. And then you've also got hormesis activity as well. So yeah,
and that largely too comes from the heat shock response. So heat shock response is something that was initially, the name, you can see it in the name, was identified through people's their body's response to shock from heat, but it's since been identified that these heat shock responses that can be triggered from various different other kinds of external stimuli as well. So cold can do it. Exposure to sulforaphane can do it, and so can a myriad other little stresses that you can apply to your body. So it's now invariably also known as a stress response, not just a heat shock response. What it does is trigger heat shock proteins in your body, and that hormetic effect is something where you apply tiny acute stresses to your body, and your body responds and gets stronger, bigger and better in response to it. Chronic stress is bad, but acute stress is good. So yeah, you can see a lot of the same sorts of things that you might get from another therapy that we're starting to have a look at, which is hypothermic conditioning. So exposing your body deliberately to extreme heat and extreme cold, but for short periods of time, so that you keep the stress big but short.
Yeah. So without going into too much of the science, one of the studies that I'd come across quite a while ago with sulforaphane was they did a study on adults with autism, and what happened was they were noting behavioural changes, like positive behavioural changes during times of fever. And so what they tested was, did this happen when sulforaphane was added? When they were given sulforaphane as a supplement, did they have the same positive changes in behaviour, so irritability and all those sorts of things? And what they found was, yes, compared to the placebos, there was quite significant changes with taking sulforaphane. And part of that is because it does actually cross the blood-brain barrier. So it creates an anti-inflammatory response in the brain. And similar to the sort of that heat shock response we were talking about, there's changes on a cellular level in the brain with taking the sulforaphane. So there's some really exciting stuff coming out of the research at the moment about how it really can help so many different people. And if you're looking for more information on that, we'll give you a couple of people to look up at the end so that you can get into the real deep science of it. But we really just want to, brush over the basics of it right now. So, yeah.
When it comes down to it, it's really, for almost everybody, a win-win with no drawbacks. All you have to do is prepare correctly and eat your cruciferous vegetables. So it's not like it's a difficult thing to do. They're delicious, or at least they are when you cook them correctly. And yeah, really for almost everybody there's no downside. There are a small population of people who have issues digesting brassicas basically, but there are ways to get around that if you have such an issue and you're keen to try to pursue it.
Yep. So the other thing that we've been doing on top of preparing our vegetables the way that we've been saying is, on top of that, we've also been supplementing with a sulforaphane or a glucoraphanin and myrosinase supplement. And so what we do is just mix it with some butter and put it on top of the things that we've been cooking. And what they've found is that in combination, far exceeds what you'd be getting sulforaphane-wise than if you were having either just the vegetables as they were or just the supplement. So together, it's more than the sum of their parts, basically. So yeah.
And we may not need it in the future when and if we get to the point where we have a good supply of sprouts going in the kitchen. We're trying to keep that fairly diverse too. At the moment, we've got on order seed for 2 different kinds of sprouts, but I'd like to see that change over time. You actually end up with a different isothiocyanate. So the sulforaphane is something that we'll get with the broccoli sprouts, but the radish sprouts that we've got on order have a sulforaphane, which is a slightly different isothiocyanate, and it has a different precursor. But myrosinase is always there as the enzyme that breaks it down.
Yep. So just to do a quick wrap up. So as I've mentioned, we first got onto this for our son's epilepsy, but we're moving on to it for our own health and all that sort of stuff. And but also the research that's coming out. If you want to find more information, there's a couple of people to look up. The first is Dr. Rhonda Patrick, and what's her website? Found My Fitness.
Yes.
Found My Fitness, and she has some amazing information there. But she's got a really good interview with Dr. Jed Fahey, which is 2.5 hours long. So that's why we're putting all this into a very short, brief, condensed video. But lots of science, lots of interesting stuff. And
lots of anecdote too, so there is a lot of interesting stuff in there if you've got the time.
Yep. If you've got any questions, stick them in the comments, because we'd definitely love to talk to you about it. Okay, thank you.
Cheers.